basic constitutional rights! You dumb bitch!
Siren cuts through the Friday dusk like a blade. The echo hasn't faded when a teenage girl collapses on Yuma Street, blood pooling beneath flashing red lights. Minutes later, another volley tears through 50th Street, then 16th Street. Each gunshot marks another pulse on the city's trembling map. Within 9 hours, 12 people are down, one of them, a 5-year-old boy, grazed in the face. The capital of the United States, the seat of power, has become the stage for a siege. As the smoke drifts through the autumn air, the timing couldn't be more explosive. The violence unfolds just as President Donald Trump intensifies his federal crackdown on violent crime, a campaign rooted in what the White House calls a zero-tolerance consequence-based doctrine. Under emergency powers in the Home Rule Act, the president has authorized a federal takeover of the Metropolitan Police Department (MPD) and ordered National Guard units to reinforce DC's most volatile sectors. By midnight, soldiers in reflective belts stand shoulder to shoulder with city police at metro hubs and street corners. Drones hum above Georgia Avenue, feeding live imagery to fusion centers downtown. Tactical teams sweep southeast alleys guided by ShotSpotter sensors that light up like constellations over a war zone. The message from the Oval Office is blunt: no sanctuary for repeat offenders, no leniency for gun traffickers, and no hesitation in restoring order. The Capitol will not fall to chaos, a senior DHS official declares on Fox News. But beneath the still language lies an older tension. How much force can a democracy use before it begins to look less like one? Federal agents and city detectives move fast. Two 19-year-olds are arrested near Howard University in connection with the homecoming shooting that left 5 injured. 3 illegal firearms are seized. Forensic specialists work under portable floodlights, photographing bullet holes in windshield glass and tracing trajectories through brick walls. Each shell casing is log-tagged and entered into ATF's E-Trace system. Reuters reports that the shooting clusters across southeast and northwest DC mirror patterns of retaliatory gunfire seen in Chicago and Baltimore, a handful of small crews responsible for most urban shootings. Defense news analysts draw parallels to counterinsurgency strategy, identify hot people, hot places, and apply maximum presence. Meanwhile, BBC and Al Jazeera describe the images flooding social media. Howard students sprinting down back streets, parents calling frantically, police tape fluttering outside nightclubs where laughter had echoed minutes before. What began as a citywide panic is fast turning into a national symbol, the test case for Trump's hard-edge urban order. Strategically, this moment carries weight beyond DC. If the Capitol itself cannot be secured, what message does that send to the rest of America, let alone the world? NATO partners already eye the domestic turmoil with unease, wary of a Washington that seems perpetually fighting itself. Yet on Savannah Terrace, where a child nearly died, philosophy feels like cruelty. Mothers crouch behind doors, holding children close. Fathers whisper, "Don't look out the window." The soldiers' boots echo on pavement, slick with rain and memory. The night asks one question that no speech can silence: can a nation claim global authority if it cannot protect its own capital? The order came down before sunrise. Under emergency provisions of the Home Rule Act, President Donald Trump formally asserted federal authority over Washington, D.C.'s Metropolitan Police Department. By dawn, the chain of command had shifted, local oversight suspended, and a joint command post established between the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the National Guard. The message from the White House: the era of hesitation was over. On national television, the president's tone was unmistakable. "We will not allow the nation's capital to be a crime zone," he said, flanked by Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and Attorney General Tom Cotton. "If the local system can't keep murderers off the street, the federal system will." Within hours, guard convoys rolled into the city's southeast corridors, Benning Road, Anacostia, and Congress Heights. Drone-mounted spotlights cut through the night sky, illuminating alleyways once ruled by street crews. Officers in tactical vests moved with precision, checking corners, clearing rooftops. The streets that once pulsed with chaos now vibrated with authority. Yet in the heart of this mobilization, the question grew louder: where is the line between protection and occupation? According to BBC and Reuters correspondents embedded with guard patrols, reactions were divided. Many residents weary from years of violence greeted the soldiers with cautious relief. At least someone's doing something, one mother told BBC. Others, particularly in historically over-policed neighborhoods, saw an unsettling echo of the past federal troops on local soil rifles slung low, eyes scanning porches. Al Jazeera's coverage noted the symbolism of federal government reclaiming its capital under Trump's America Restored campaign, a doctrine that views domestic order as inseparable from national strength. Defense News added that the operation's command structure mirrored military-style stabilization tactics, integrating intelligence fusion, predictive analytics, and precision raids methods refined in Iraq and Afghanistan, but now adapted to urban America. At police headquarters, tension ran high. Some MPD commanders bristled privately at losing autonomy, but others admitted relief. "We've been outgunned," one senior officer told Reuters. "Now we have backup that doesn't clock out at midnight." Meanwhile, data analysts from the FBI's National Crime Center mapped the previous night's shootings against parole and probation records. Patterns emerged: half of the suspects under investigation had open cases or were awaiting trial for prior gun charges. That revelation ignited fury in the White House. Trump's advisors, citing The Guardian's reporting on revolving door justice, pushed for a national model of no bond for repeat offenders. Inside the Capitol, the debate was immediate and fierce. Civil libertarians warned that a federal takeover of city policing set a dangerous precedent. DW's European commentators described it as a constitutional stress test, a reminder that America's promise of local democracy was being bent under the weight of fear. But Trump's allies saw it differently. They argued that the Constitution grants the federal government not just the right, but the duty to defend the Capitol. When bullets hit children 2 miles from the White House, Senator J.D. Vance declared, "This isn't about politics, it's about sovereignty." The streets told their own story. Traffic checkpoints multiplied. Helicopters traced slow arcs above the Potomac. At Howard University, where homecoming festivities had turned to chaos, military police patrolled alongside campus security. Yet the sight that captured the world came near midnight, a column of National Guard troops marching down Georgia Avenue as rain fell through the glow of blue lights. Cameras from Reuters and BBC broadcast the scene: live America's capital under control or under siege, depending on who was watching. The nation's debate now stretched far beyond DC. It had become a reflection of something deeper. Can federal strength restore peace without erasing the very freedoms it claims to defend? Rain slicked the asphalt as the manhunt began. 2 19-year-olds were already in custody for the Howard area shooting, but ballistic forensics hinted at a wider network: same caliber, same hand-modified Glock switches, same signature casings. These aren't random, said a senior ATF analyst to Reuters. They're connected by the gun. By dawn, a multi-agency task force, MPD, FBI, ATF, U.S. Marshals, and DHS activated Operation Iron Web, a name that leaked within hours. The mission tracked the shooters dismantle their pipeline and expose the suppliers who fed Washington's underground arsenal. It wasn't just about one weekend, it was about restoring the idea that the capital city was not a free-fire zone. Inside a windowless command center downtown, glowing maps traced ballistic links from Anacostia to Prince George's County. Every shell casing from every scene was uploaded to ATF's NIBIN system. Matches began to appear like constellations, threads of violence, connecting stolen cars, straw purchases, and handguns traded through encrypted apps. Jane's Defense Weekly compared the data fusion to a military-style intelligence cycle: find, fix, finish. The same doctrine used in counter-terror operations overseas was now applied to domestic crime. The task force even deployed small tactical drones, scanning rooftops for suspects on the move. Defense News reported that Trump's DHS had fast-tracked AI-driven predictive policing models capable of flagging high-risk microzones within hours of a shooting. But technology could not replace instinct. Veteran detectives walked alleys where the air still smelled of gunpowder. They knew the rhythm of retaliation the second wave often hits before dawn. Across police radio channels, the chatter was sharp and urgent. Lock down the corners, watch the buses, check the car lots. By midday Saturday, U.S. Marshals hit a suspected safe house off Benning Road. 2 more guns recovered, both traced to a straw purchaser in Virginia, part of a trafficking chain that had already armed half a dozen D.C. shootings this year. The Guardian's coverage exposed a stunning figure: nearly 70% of firearms used in district crimes originated outside the city. Meanwhile, FBI cyber units tracked dark web sales of modified conversion devices, the kind that turn semi-automatics into illegal machine pistols. One intercepted message read, "DC lit last night. Need more stock?" Each discovery deepened the portrait of a city under siege, not by ideology, but by a machinery of profit and revenge. Yet beneath the tactical success lay a human fracture. Families of the wounded gathered at Howard University Hospital praying through exhaustion. A 5-year-old boy with stitches across his cheek. A teenage girl clutching her mother's hand, afraid to close her eyes. Outside, reporters whispered about urban terrorism, a phrase first used by DW's Berlin desk to describe the pattern of localized violence overwhelming civic trust. Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. Attorney for D.C., briefed reporters late that night. Her tone was surgical. If you pull a trigger in this city, you will face federal time. Not community service, not a plea deal. Prison. Al Jazeera described the press conference as both law and theater, a calculated show of resolve meant to reassure a rattled nation. Strategically, this crackdown served multiple fronts. Domestically, it projected control. Internationally, it signaled that America's seat of power would not tolerate weakness. As one defense news analyst noted, if Washington itself collapses into disorder, every U.S. deterrent posture abroad loses credibility. But even as the arrests mounted, questions lingered like the echo of gunfire. Could these raids truly end the cycle or merely push it into darker corners? Could data and drones replace trust in neighborhoods where police are seen as both shield and shadow? The hunt for shooters became more than an operation. It became a test of America's promise that law can be both strong and just. And still, the city waited for dawn. By Sunday morning, Washington was divided not by geography, but by belief. Half the city hailed the crackdown as the long-awaited answer to lawlessness. The other half saw it as the rebirth of control under a new banner security. From the White House press podium to late-night talk shows, the clash of narratives burned hotter than the muzzle flashes that started it all. On one side stood the architects of the operation, President Donald Trump, Attorney General Tom Cotton, and DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, defending what Reuters called the most aggressive federal anti-crime intervention in the Capitol since the 1970s. Their message was blunt: DC would not be surrendered to gangs, lenient judges, or sanctuary loopholes. If you want safety, you need strength, Trump told reporters flanked by National Guard officers. On the other side, civil rights advocates and progressive lawmakers painted a darker picture. This is not policing, it's occupation, warned Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton in a BBC interview. The Guardian's editorial board questioned whether deploying federal troops on American streets blurred the line between democracy and militarization. But on cable news, the lines weren't so neat. Parents from Southeast DC appeared on Fox and CNN, their voices trembling. "We've been living like this for years," one mother said, tears on her cheeks. "If it takes soldiers to make them stop shooting, then let them stay." DW analysts in Berlin observed that America's internal conflict over crime echoed Europe's post-terrorism dilemmas: how to balance civil liberty with collective survival. Every democracy faces the same paradox, wrote political scientist Klaus Ritter. The freer the society, the greater its vulnerability when fear takes hold. Al Jazeera reported the ripple effects abroad. Allies in Europe privately questioned Washington's image as a global model of stability. If the US Capitol needs troops to police its own streets, one EU diplomat told the outlet, how can it lecture others about governance? Yet the Trump administration leaned into the symbolism. Behind closed doors, sources confirmed to Defense News that federal intelligence assets were integrating local crime data into a national urban shield framework, turning DC into a pilot zone for predictive policing models later slated for Chicago, Atlanta, and Philadelphia. Jeanine Pirro, leading the Justice Department's DC prosecutions, delivered the administration's moral counterstrike. "This isn't about militarization," she declared on ABC News. "It's about moral restoration. If you can't walk your child to school without hearing gunfire, your freedom is already gone." The political temperature rose as fast as the body count dropped. Within 48 hours, shootings in the city fell by nearly 70%. Patrols saturated hot zones. Curfews tightened. For the first time in months, Howard University students walked across the yard at dusk without sprinting to cover. But victories carried a cost. The Guardian highlighted reports of mission creep soldiers extending patrols into non-designated zones, and residents stopped for ID checks. Legal scholars warned that each emergency measure, once normalized, tends to linger long after the crisis ends. Inside the Beltway, think tanks began dissecting the meaning of security in Trump's second term. Was it a renewed social contract or a rehearsal for centralized authority? Reuters quoted a former Pentagon strategist: "Every show of power becomes precedent. What starts in DC rarely stays there." Still, many Americans cheered. Crime graphs fell, arrests rose. The president's approval ratings on law and order spiked in national polls. And yet, beneath the triumph, a haunting uncertainty echoed like the fading hum of helicopters over the Potomac. How long can a nation tighten its grip before it forgets why it clenched its fist in the first place? Monday dawned gray and heavy over Judiciary Square. Inside the E. Barrett Prettyman Federal Courthouse, the air crackled with a tension thicker than the rain outside. The weekend's violence had shifted to its next battlefield, the courtroom. Here the nation would learn whether President Trump's doctrine of consequence-based enforcement could withstand the slow grind of American justice. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro entered the chamber flanked by federal marshals, her expression unflinching. Before her two 19-year-olds, the first suspects in the Howard area shooting sat in shackles. The prosecutor wasted no words. The evidence is clear, Your Honor. Repeat offenders, multiple firearms, zero remorse. The government requests immediate pretrial detention, no bond. Across the aisle, the defense argued back mistaken identity masked suspects' weak lighting, the same old dance. Yet the mood had changed. Behind the judge's bench loomed the weight of a federal mandate. This was no ordinary city crime hearing. It was a referendum on a national strategy. Reuters described it as a collision between federal velocity and judicial gravity. Under new DOJ guidance, prosecutors had been ordered to file enhanced charges for any gun offense tied to repeat offenders or school zones, effectively ensuring that plea deals were off the table. The BBC reported that Washington's courthouses were now operating under round-the-clock schedules to handle the surge in filings. The first rulings came swiftly. No bail, federal detention, charges upgraded under the firearm in furtherance of a conspiracy statute. The courtroom gasped not at the outcome, but at the speed. Al Jazeera noted that the move sent shockwaves through civil liberties groups who accused the administration of turning justice into spectacle. But to supporters, it was proof that promises from the podium could finally be enforced. The streets are quieter, one DC mother told DW. If it takes tough judges to keep them that way, so be it. Behind the scenes, task force prosecutors met with Defense Department advisors, adapting military-style data fusion for civilian courts, tracking firearm trajectories, digital footprints, and criminal networks as if mapping insurgent cells. Jane's Defense Weekly called it forensic warfare justice as counterinsurgency. But justice even accelerated remained human. In the courthouse cafeteria, a nurse from Howard Hospital watched the hearing replay on a tablet. "That little boy's still got stitches," she whispered. "All this talk of policy, and I still see his face." Outside, a protest formed law students, activists, veterans, each chanting a different truth. Protect our communities clashed with restore local control. The Guardian captured the contrast in one headline: America's capital becomes its mirror justice or domination. Meanwhile, Trump's senior advisor, Stephen Miller, told Fox News that the Capitol's transformation would be the model for restoring order nationwide. Leaked DOJ memos confirmed plans to replicate the DC prosecution model in crime-ridden corridors from Baltimore to St. Louis. Yet experts warned of a dangerous precedent. DW analysts called it an experiment in total deterrence. Could a justice system built for balance survive the pressure of political performance? Could law remain impartial under the floodlights of televised success? Inside the courthouse, the judge delivered his closing words. This city's pain cannot be measured in arrests alone. It will be measured by whether the next generation lives without fear. The gavel dropped a sharp final echo of the weekend's violence. Outside, the rain began again, tapping softly against the courthouse steps like a metronome of unfinished justice. And as the first cases moved from arraignment to trial, Washington's question shifted from how many arrests to how much freedom could endure this new era of order. Because behind every conviction lies a cost, and the nation was still calculating it. How far should a democracy go to defend itself before justice becomes judgment? The city exhaled, but only barely. By midweek, the roar of gunfire had fallen silent, replaced by the low hum of military convoys and the rhythmic sweep of street patrols. The National Guard remained stationed at metro hubs and school zones. MPD's command posts glowed through the night like nerve centers of a patient still in surgery. Washington, D.C. was breathing again, but under supervision. On the White House lawn, President Donald Trump addressed reporters beneath the steady drizzle. "The American Capitol is secure," he declared, "and it will stay secure as long as I'm president." Behind him, the flag snapped in the wind, a symbol of triumph or warning depending on the viewer. Reuters called it a fragile calm built on steel. The BBC described the transformation as an experiment in perpetual emergency. The administration's defenders pointed to numbers shootings down 73% in 1 week. Arrests up 58, illegal gun seizures doubled. But beneath the statistics, something deeper stirred an unease that this new peace might be too quiet, too controlled. Inside, the Pentagon Defense News reported ongoing coordination between DHS and the Department of Defense, exploring how predictive policing models refined during the DC crackdown could be integrated into national security frameworks. The pilot name, Homeland Sentinel. Critics saw a blueprint for domestic militarization. Supporters called it 21st century law enforcement. Jeanine Pirro, hailed by Fox and derided by The Guardian, stood before cameras again. Justice is not a slogan, she said. It's a structure, and we're rebuilding it brick by brick. Across town, civil rights attorney Malik Sanders countered, if justice must march in boots, it's no longer justice, it's control. The philosophical divide widened as fast as the crime rate narrowed. Al Jazeera noted how Washington had become a global spectacle, a democracy enforcing order with tactics once reserved for war zones. European analysts at DW compared the capital's posture to Cold War Berlin, a fortress of ideals surrounded by suspicion. Every patrol, every checkpoint, every drone is a reflection of the world's oldest struggle, wrote DW's Katharina Müller, Security versus Freedom. Yet, amid the arguments, the human cost lingered quietly. The little boy with the stitched cheek smiled again at Howard Hospital. Students returned to class beneath the gaze of National Guard sentries. Families dared to walk after sunset. For the first time in months, mothers could hear laughter on their streets. But as the weekend approached, the president's security advisors faced the final unspoken question: when does emergency become normal? Jane's Defense Weekly warned of mission permanence. Once federal power expands to fill a crisis, it rarely retreats. And so Washington stood at a crossroad to either reclaim its autonomy or accept a future where federal armor is the price of peace. In the end, the city's fate mirrored the nation's. Between fear and freedom, between protection and power, the United States was testing its own limits. Its belief that democracy can be both unyielding and humane. Night returned to the Capitol, quiet and watchful. The lights of the Capitol dome flickered over streets that still remembered the sound of gunfire. Somewhere a siren wailed and then stopped. The silence that followed was not peace, it was potential. So the question now turns to every citizen watching: if this level of force is what it takes to make America safe again, should it stay or should it stop before safety becomes surrender? In the aftermath of one of Washington, D.C.'s bloodiest weekends, President Donald Trump asserts federal control over the city's police force, deploying National Guard units and authorizing sweeping new enforcement powers. The crackdown, hailed by some as restoration, condemned by others as overreach, transforms the Capitol into a test site for Trump's consequence-based crime policy. Federal agents trace illegal gun pipelines, prosecutors fast-track cases under no-bond directives, and technology once used in war zones is redeployed on American streets. The operation restores order, but at a cost: a city guarded by soldiers, its freedom measured in silence. Analysts from Reuters, BBC, DW, and Defense News frame it as both victory and warning, a glimpse of a nation balancing on the edge between liberty and control.